For years, I felt the corrosive weight of an unspoken question that silently haunts the modern man, robbing him of his vitality, his strength, and his purpose. Why is it so difficult, so unbearably heavy to start what we know is absolutely necessary for our lives? I am not talking about grand, heroic deeds, about building an empire from scratch or scaling Everest. I am talking about the small, daily victories that define your future. I am talking about opening the laptop for that crucial project, lacing up the sneakers for the promised run, or making the essential phone call that will unlock your career. You wake up every day with the vague, constant feeling of being irremediably lost, your mind trapped in a destructive paralysis that prevents you from taking the first step, be it in your career, relationships, or health. This inaction is not an accident. It is the root of your suffering and your self-sabotage. The real problem, the primary source of your anguish and your persistent inaction, does not lie in the lack of a grand, abstract purpose or a cosmic calling you haven't yet heard. The cause is much more mundane and brutally simple. It is your simple, persistent refusal to move, to initiate the minimum gesture of action. Stagnation should not be seen as a mere symptom of laziness or a moral failure. It is the main enemy the modern man fails to name, and it kills your inner motivation, atrophies your potential, and silently drains your soul day after day while you distract yourself with the noise of digital superficiality. Inertia is not just a state, it is an active force, a black hole actively working against your future, sucking all your life potential into the void. The dilemma is clear and strategically destroys your life before you even realize the game. You passively wait for magical inspiration, for overwhelming willpower, for the right moment, or for absolute clarity to act. But this waiting, this contemplative and passive posture, is the strategic defeat that cancels all your chances of victory before the battle even begins. It is a silent surrender. The promise I bring you today is the definitive liberation from this mental and physical prison. We will no longer wait for motivation.
To break this chronic paralysis, we must rely on the fundamental principle of the master of military strategy, Sun Tzu, the foundation of our entire strategy of awakening, the power of the situation, or Shi. The wise general's teaching does not focus on the brute force of soldiers or individual heroism, for these are finite and exhausting resources that depend on mood and morale. He explains that victory is never obtained through a last-minute effort. Victory is achieved first and foremost by the architecture of a favorable environment and moment. A wise general does not waste his energy fighting the obvious resistance of the enemy. On the contrary, he organizes his forces, his terrain, and his time in such a way that the combat itself, the execution of the battle, is merely the confirmation, the logical and inevitable consequence of a victory that was already guaranteed by the situation he forged before the first strike. Your movement on the battlefield thus becomes inevitable, almost automatic. He doesn't need motivation, he has Shi. The practical relationship is immediate and must be urgently transposed to your daily routine. Stagnation is your current unfavorable situation, your disorganized battlefield full of escape routes. The awakening is not an adrenaline rush, it is reversing this Shi. This means organizing your day, your workspace, and your body in such a way that action and productivity become the line of least resistance, the easiest, most obvious, and most logical path to follow. The practicality is direct and brutal in its philosophical simplicity. You must not exhaust yourself fighting relentlessly for motivation against inertia. You, intelligently and strategically, create the external and internal conditions for that motivation to flow by itself, like water on a slope, without friction. Inertia is defeated by architecture, by the engineering of your environment. The real question you must ask yourself from now on is not, how do I force myself to act, but rather, how do I rearrange my environment and my schedule so that action is the only easy path, the only one left, the inevitable one? The general does not seek willpower, he seeks the arrangement. Consider the example of a river. The river does not need motivation to flow to the sea. It flows because the situation, gravity, and the slope of the terrain makes movement not only easy but inevitable. Your struggle against inertia is the futile attempt to force water uphill. She is the strategy of tilting the terrain of your life. This means removing obstacles, eliminating unnecessary decisions, and predefining success. If you leave your workout clothes on the floor and the coffee programmed for 6 a.m., the probability of acting at 6:01 a.m. becomes exponentially higher. You didn't need motivation, you needed strategic preparation. The power of Shi is not just about the physical environment, it's about anticipation. The wisest warrior is the one who wins the battle long before stepping onto the field because he read the map, understood the terrain, and positioned his forces where the enemy is weakest. In your life, this means anticipating the moments when your willpower will be the lowest, usually early morning or late in the day, and pre-installing the solution for those moments. For example, the decision to eat healthy is lost at 8 p.m. when you are hungry and tired. The victory is guaranteed at 5 p.m. when you prepare the meal. Action at 8 p.m. is merely the confirmation of the Shi you created at 5 p.m. The tragedy of the modern man is his romantic belief that motivation must be spontaneous and emotional, a fire that explodes out of nowhere. Sun Tzu teaches us that real motivation is cold, calculated, and created. Inspiration is volatile, Shi is eternal. You don't need to feel the will. You need to create the situation where the will is irrelevant and action is the standard. This is the philosophical foundation. Now, we need to understand the inner enemy that sabotages this architecture.
Now we must descend to the inner battlefield. To apply the Shi effectively, we urgently need to understand why our mind sabotages it so effectively. Why does man persist in paralyzing himself on the edge of the abyss, even knowing perfectly well what needs to be done? The psychoanalyst Carl Jung translates the principle of Shi into a profound and destructive human behavior, exposing the inner enemy that resides in his psyche. The inner mechanism of paralysis is the internal struggle, the civil war of the psyche between the ego, the persona, the social mask you present to the world and which fears evaluation, and the shadow, the unlived potential, the capacity for real execution, your raw and authentic force. Your ego, the part that fears public humiliation and self-criticism, has a deep dread of failing in action and exposing its fragility and imperfection to itself and others. The ego does not fear failure. It fears the humiliation of the imperfect attempt that the ego cannot control or justify. It is the tyranny of perfection that paralyzes you. Jung names the conflict that imprisons you. The inner enemy is the stagnant self, a sophisticated psychological complex that finds satisfaction, security, and a false sense of purpose in exhaustive theoretical reading and planning. Why? Because planning gives you the illusion of progress and the feeling of being productive and busy, but without the real risk of execution and possible failure. The concrete example is the man who reads 10 philosophy books on purpose and strategy, watches all the tutorials on YouTube, subscribes to all the productivity newsletters, but does not dedicate 30 daily minutes to the real work on his project. He uses the excess of information as armor to justify inaction. Excessive reading and planning are the ego's sophisticated escape to avoid confrontation with the raw potential and concrete reality that is only integrated by action. Paralysis is, therefore, your mind cruelly protecting itself from validation in the real world. Jung's reflective question is the key to awakening and naming your enemy. Who within you feels safer in meticulous and infinite planning than in the imperfect and risky action that generates results? The sincere answer to this question reveals the name of your main obstacle, the exact point where the battle must be fought, and more importantly, reveals the place where your shadow is imprisoned and waiting to be liberated. If you are ready to name this inner enemy and release the strength of your shadow imprisoned by the tyranny of the ego, subscribe to the channel now. In the next block, we will connect this psychological struggle with the science of action and give you the exact trigger to win this internal battle. The awakening begins here. If paralysis is a psychological conflict between the ego and the shadow, the breaking of this inertia is fundamentally neurochemical and biological. It is not about moral strength or innate virtue, but about applied brain engineering. This is where we connect Sun Tzu's strategic philosophy and Jung's deep psychology directly to the functioning of your central nervous system. The philosopher, neuroscientist, and mindfulness master Sam Harris gives us the practical and demystified functioning. Motivation is not a mystical entity, a bolt from the blue, or a gift of special people. It is, at its rawest base, a predictable neurochemical circuit. The dopamine reward circuit, the chemical of desire, search, and continuity, is activated by action, by movement, by the friction of execution. It is never activated by your passive contemplation, exhaustive reading, or abstract planning. The energy that sustains focus does not come from thought. It comes from movement. This is an unbreakable biological law. The practical connection is vital and must be memorized as a code. The paralysis you feel is not moral laziness, character failure, or lack of willpower. It is, in fact, the initial dopamine deficit. Your brain is waiting for a great stimulus, a perfect idea, or an overwhelming inspiration to justify the expenditure of energy and therefore refuses to start. And that great inspiration, which is actually a dopamine spike, never arrives without the initial input. You need a switch, a physical trigger that forces the initial release. You need the first gesture, the minimal action, the most stupid and simplest possible for your brain to start secreting the dopamine cascade that sustains continuity and focus. The beginning is, biologically, the only cure for inertia. The behavioral adjustment is focused on reducing the friction of starting to zero. The goal is not to fight procrastination. The goal is to make the act of starting so ridiculously easy and uninteresting to the ego that it cannot justify resistance. Your ritual of action must be so simple, obvious, and routine that it requires no mental debate or extra willpower. Philosophy becomes pure biology.
The only way to cure mental paralysis, the inertia of the soul, is through deliberate and immediate physical movement. The small exercise that changes your state immediately is the 5-second gesture. At the exact moment of hesitation, distraction, or self-sabotage, observe the resistance, count down from 5 to 1 or 3 to 1, and immediately execute the first physical step without allowing thought to create an escape route. If you need to write, open the document on the laptop. If you need to run, put on your shoes. The body moves the mind. The physics of action precedes the chemistry of motivation. It is here, in this deliberate 5-second physical gesture, that philosophy ceases to be just a theoretical idea and becomes the practical key to your awakening. Action is the spark that ignites the engine of motivation.
If you have internalized the diagnosis and the biological trigger, this is the time to unite everything into an operational manual, transforming philosophy into an unbreakable tactic. This is the moment to create the she through practical tactics and achieve the final transformation of your identity. True control, as philosophy teaches us, is not rigidity, self-punishment, or self-flagellation. It is rather the strategic and intelligent alignment of your mind, body, and environment toward where you want to go. Sun Tzu's power of the situation manifests in your routine through the constant and strategic execution of the following tactics. The new approach is the engineering of will, manifested in 3 tactics for immediate and actionable execution, forged at the intersection of military strategy, depth psychology, and the science of mind. These are your field commands for awakening. 1. The no-return structure. Burn the bridges of retreat. Sun Tzu teaches the principle of the death ground, the military situation where the only option is to fight to survive, as retreat is unacceptable and fatal. To escape stagnation, you need to apply this by eliminating, physically or digitally, the escape routes and easy retreat options that your ego loves and seeks. Use the no-return structure in your life with 3 unbreakable commands. Non-negotiable action from the night before. Program the first action before going to sleep, leaving materials ready and the plan non-negotiable. Example, if you are going to train, the clothes and water bottle are ready next to the bed. This makes the start a mechanical action and not a decision requiring willpower. Burn the technological bridge. Use technology to block distractions during set times, configuring apps or software to burn the digital bridge. If your work requires focus, the cell phone should be in another room or blocked. Social commitment. Commit publicly to your project, using social pressure as your personal death ground fence. The fear of disappointing others is a powerful she to force action, transforming a personal goal into an external responsibility. 2. The art of attacking the void. Use the dead moments. The wise general does not attack strength, but the weakness and the void of the enemy. Your motivation and your time are hidden in the voids of your routine, the unused moments of inertia and transition that you automatically fill with passive consumption. The method is simple and highly effective. Use downtime, such as waiting, commuting, or the 5 minutes between tasks for minimal and strategic actions instead of filling them with distraction. Empty time is your most valuable resource, as the mental resistance and friction to act within it are the lowest. Transform the void into action. 3. The awareness of the moment. Action as meditation. Paralysis and lack of purpose arise from the dispersed mind, floating uncontrollably between the past and the future.
For Sun Tzu, the general must be fully present in the action, as total focus is strength itself. Action is not a means to an end, it is the portal to the now. The method is slow, intentional action. As you move, as you lift a weight, as you write a line, or even as you do a household chore, feel the movement of your body, the texture of the object, and the ambient sound. This unifies the mind and body, anchoring you in present reality and dissipating the vague, agonizing feeling of being lost. True control is not rigidity. It is strategic and total alignment. The result is your integration of the shadow.
The final and deepest result of applying this structure of strategic and neurochemical action, the she, forced by the discipline of the 5-second gesture, is the most radical psychological transformation, the healing of your existential inertia through the psyche. Jung explains that awakening through persistent and deliberate action is not just an external productivity feat or a checked item on a to-do list. It is, in its deepest essence, the direct integration of the shadow into your consciousness. The meaning of this process is crucial for your identity and self-respect. The shadow is not your evil side. It is your unlived potential, the raw capacity, the version of yourself you know you possess, but which was imprisoned by the paralyzing fear of the ego. Every small action performed, every 5-second gesture executed despite internal resistance, is an unquestionable proof of will, concrete evidence that yourself desperately needed to see to finally silence the critical ego and release its vital energy. Action is the only language your soul understands, and that establishes self-trust. Your transformation is immediate. You become defined exclusively by the capacity to execute and deliver action in the real world. This heals the chronic wound of the ego that feared failure and dissolves the paralysis of infinite planning. The final outcome is the silence of anguish. The vague and constant feeling of being lost dissolves because the path is being created actively, brick by brick, beneath your feet, through your present and deliberate action. At this point, theory merges into a perfect alchemy. The unification is your new philosophy. Sun Tzu's power of the situation, she, is the external structure that forces the movement. This movement releases the will of Jung's self, integrating the shadow. And all of this is boosted by Sam Harris's neurochemistry of action. Your existential priority is not to feel motivated, but rather to create the first she of the day, the first inevitable movement. Therefore, the final and most important question is, what is the single, simple, unbreakable action, your 5-second gesture, that you will execute today, right now, to create your inevitable situation of victory? Define it, write it down, and execute it before doubt sets in. To conclude this journey of transformation, remember the central truth. You were not lost, nor were you lazy. You were just waiting in the wrong place, trapped in the vicious cycle of waiting for the feeling to act. Meaning, motivation, and purpose are not mysterious gifts. They are born from the friction, the resistance, and the persistence of execution. The final lesson is the unbreakable discipline to move when you do not feel like it, to do what is necessary despite the ego's resistance.
This is the irrefutable proof of your inner sovereignty and the foundation of your unshakable motivation. Wisdom is not read, it is lived. Make your move, and purpose will follow. To cement this truth in your mind and declare your irrevocable commitment to action, comment SHI and subscribe to continue forging your path.